Welcome back. You're watching Nation Tonight. 2 months after being sworn in as the Maldives president, Mohammad Muizzu is already facing an impeachment motion. After unprecedented scenes of ruckus and violent brawls emerged out of the Maldivian parliament on Sunday, the opposition Maldivian Democratic Party, or MDP, and Democrats are now all set to submit an impeachment motion against President Muizzu. Let's get you what led to this. On Sunday, a clash broke out during a special session which was convened to seek parliamentary approval for the ministers in President Mohammad Muizzu's cabinet. These included Ahmad Usham, the Attorney General, Mohammad Saeed, the Economic Minister, Dr. Ali Haider, the Housing Minister, and Dr. Mohammad Shahim Ali Saeed, the Islamic Minister. Now, MPs from pro-government parties, the People's National Congress, or the PNC, and the Progressive Party of Maldives, or the PPM, disrupted proceedings and submitted a no-confidence motion against the two speakers who are part of MDP. A brawl broke out, which basically now led to the impeachment motion against the president. What are Muizzu's chances? Well, the Maldivian parliament recently amended its standing orders in order to make it easier for MPs to submit an impeachment motion. The current strength of the Maldivian parliament is 80. MDP, the opposition party, enjoys the majority with 42 MPs. PPM and PNC have 19, and other parties are 19 in number as well. Amid all of this, 2/3 of vote is needed for the impeachment motion to pass. 54 votes are basically needed. The opposition already has 56 members, interestingly, who've signed the impeachment motion against Muizzu. Once it's submitted, President Muizzu will have 14 days to come up with an explanation, and on the 14th day, he gets 1 hour to reply. If the motion passes with 54 votes, President Muizzu has to step down, and elections have to be announced in the next 60 days. So by far, this has been what is the latest in Maldivian politics. Let's get more perspective on this. On the broadcast, I'm joined by Mr. Pinak Ranjan Chakravarty, former secretary in the MEA. I'm also joined by Patikrit Pain, geopolitical analyst. Good evening, namaskar. Welcome to both you gentlemen. Ambassador Chakravarty, I'd like to start with you. How do you see this really playing out? First, the ruckus. Now, of course, the anti-India, pro-China Maldivian president facing some really hard domestic challenges.
Well, if you look at it in overall sense, I think it's part of Chinese strategy to subvert India's interests and influence in our neighborhood. That's number one. Number two is, of course, that there can be no doubt that President Muizzu is speaking with lots of Chinese cash in his pocket, and apart from his party. So I think but India. Number three is that India is usually, brought into a domestic issue by in other countries surrounding India and neighbors as well, to do their local politics. So we have to be, cognizant of the fact that this is going to happen. I mean, in our neighboring countries, that India will be seen as the big sort of neighbor, and hence there will be opposition, there will be support. Everything is possible, and this is the politics that is being played out in the Maldives. So I think but there is no doubt that Chinese money is very, very important in this whole scenario, and they are, in other countries as well, they are fueling this kind of opposition to India for their own geostrategic reasons. How India deals with it is a different question.
And therefore, let me take this to Patikrit. Patikrit, because there's been such a pro-China stand, and the fact that the Chinese support to President Muizzu is not a hidden fact, do you now see some sort of Chinese intervention in what President Muizzu is facing? Of course, the numbers have to be in the Maldivian parliament and all of that. But do you see any sort of Chinese intervention at all in this?
Shreya, good evening. First of all, it's an impeccable mark of a country in chaos after firmly holding the hands of China. We have seen it in so many other countries, including Sri Lanka, including Nepal, including Pakistan. So, frankly speaking, it's not something new. But you're perfectly right because I don't think the Chinese would have played it for such a short period. I'm sure they have something in mind in order to ensure that somehow Muizzu completes 5 years, in power. The problem with Muizzu is this: I think he overplayed it his bid to appease the Chinese. See, the problem was never with decoupling. They could have maintained good relations both with India and China. I think the Indians would not have opposed that either. The issue is that Muizzu started behaving like a proxy of China and started saying things against China which even China doesn't say against India. Started saying things against India, which even China doesn't say against India. Now, I think people, if you see the opposition parties today reacting, it's because they realize, beyond the rhetoric, there's a harsh reality. Eventually, people of Maldives for treatment would have to come to India. They can't go to China. Eventually, tourists in large number will have to come from India. Eventually, if Lakshadweep comes up, because if the pace at which infrastructure build up happens in any place in the Modi regime, we have seen in Ayodhya or Kashi, in probably 2-3 years, they know the kind of competition Maldives would face. Eventually, it would have to be people from India who would be working in the Chinese Maldivian, hospitality industry. It can't be Chinese. So I think the harsh reality is biting them. And because Muizzu said we will not take medicines and other things from India. So for something which you could have got for $1, now you are buying it at $100. I think because of that, this is happening. But let's not rule out the possibility of an emergency. Let's not rule out the possibility of a bigger chaos. Unfortunately, it is very difficult for any country, including India, to right now intervene. But I think the chaos in Maldives is not going to end so soon. Even if he gets impeached, even if he knows that he might get impeached, in that case, he'll do something to stay in power. You might have a military rule. You might have emergency declared. You might have a lot of opposition parliamentarians getting, cancelled by, they're thrown out of the parliament on the day of voting. So we'll hold on to something. And cash can play a role also. So I think, unfortunately, many of these smaller countries who should have played a very sublime role, stayed away from the major powerhouses actually fighting with each other or into their tug of war. Maldives cannot afford it. I give you an example, Shreya. Maldives annual GDP is less than the turnover of TCS. So that's how small they are, and they're trying to do things which eventually the local people are perhaps facing. So it can be anything. It can be a Sri Lanka kind of situation also, where the president had to run away from the country. It can be a civil war like a situation as well. So both extremes are possible.
Yeah. Which obviously leads to the next logical question, Ambassador Chakravarty. How should India then be viewing this? We know that whatever happens in Maldives will have wider implications for the neighborhood and the entire Indian Ocean region. It is their domestic issue right now, but in case there is an emergency imposed, and Maldives is, not new to impeachment motions against presidents. It has happened multiple times in the past as well. How should India be really dealing with this now?
I think we should, as youngsters want to say, play it cool, in the sense that we don't have to react in any aggressive manner. I think we should watch the situation. We have enough friends in the Maldives, and so they need our support, and we should give it to them, and they will take care of it. I don't think we need any heavy-handed kind of approach. I think Maldives is divided in the sense that there are enough people there who realize that what Muizzu is trying to do is fueled by Chinese money. And so that realization is very much there. And there are people there, right-thinking people who realize that getting into bed with China is like, getting into bed with a dragon who will finally take over our country. And I think that realization is there. So, but I think these things happen in our neighboring countries because thanks to China, and partly the Islamic axis where Pakistan plays a role is also a factor. Because don't forget that Maldives, per capita wise, has sent the maximum number of people to the ISIS. I mean, this is incredible. I mean, if you look at it. So there is a heavy Islamist Salafist influence in that country, which goads people into this kind of very communal kind of approaches that we have seen in, in other neighboring countries like Pakistan, for example. So I think this is a problem that has to be, that will play out within Maldives in many ways. Maldivians are not are smart people. They will realize soon that getting on the getting into this kind of a situation is not going to help them. It will be against their national interest. So I'm willing to give them some time to sort it out and wait and see.
Okay. Okay. Pathikrit, how much of, the anti-India stand that President Muizzu stands by and won the election by is now backfiring? Do you think it's backfiring? Because as Ambassador Chakravarty said, the country is divided. The opposition wasn't very happy with the fact that he has taken this anti-India stand and he's close to China. Do you think it's backfiring? If it is, how much, and how would that impact this whole impeachment motion that we're going to see now?
Rhetoric has its own relevance, but once you win elections, you need to mellow down. That's where I think Muizzu miscalculated, and he tried to overplay on the presumption that come what may, the Chinese will come and help him out and bail him out. But if you look at the example of what happened to Rajapaksa, when he had to run away from the country, the Chinese did not come to bail him out.
Yeah.
So I think the Chinese, the moment they realize that somebody has overplayed and has become a liability, the Chinese don't think twice before dumping that person. So yes, it is biting. If you see, the opposition members are today crying foul, and they have gone to that extent to impeach, knowing well that they might also themselves have to face election again, and most parliamentarians and legislators don't want to face election at such a quick, short notice again after having been elected barely a few months back. I think because there are sentiments running high within Maldives that things are not working well, because they have an overwhelming dependence on India for all the goods and services that they use. The commodities come from India. I'm sure somewhere it is that they're feeling the pinch on a daily basis on especially on essential commodities. China cannot supply them because the logistical price will be so high because of the logistical challenges that they can't afford it. But let me tell you, had it been some other time, money from Middle East would have come in. But today, Middle East has its own complex challenges it's dealing with. I think Maldives is a very small, pardon my word, is an irritant for them to focus that much. For China also, Maldives is not so important that they will, put everything into that thing. So I think Muizzu, might stand completely alone when the impeachment happens, and he might be desperate. He might do anything, as I stated. We don't know. I think for India, there are two challenges. Of course, one challenge was to ensure that the Chinese don't end up creating a major base over in Maldives, which is a permanent, headache in that region. The other one is that if the chaos increased beyond a point in Maldives, and if India does not help, the possibility of people, a large number of immigrants coming into India, illegally in boats, that is another challenge. As Ambassador mentioned, that a large section of the population is already radicalized. So I think if push comes to a shove where Maldives faces a situation like Sri Lanka, there's a huge crisis of essential commodities. India would have very little option but to go ahead again to send the aid, because they don't want that complete place to completely collapse. It will create more problems. But of course, conditions will be applied that time, as perhaps were applied on Sri Lanka.
Yeah. All right, we'll leave it there. Pathikrit Payne and Ambassador Pinak Ranjan Chakravarty, thank you very much to both you gentlemen for joining us on Mirror Now and sharing your perspective on this big challenge that President Muizzu of the Maldives is now facing. Of course, we'll have to see how it really pans out for the president here on. Let's move on. Let's shift our